Biology is nothing more than a coincidence, a harsh lesson I learned when I was sick, starving, and staring at the newly changed locks on my family's front door. Now that my bank account boasts 7 zeros, they are suddenly desperate for a reunion. They want to play happy family again. But they're about to find out that my games have much higher stakes. My name is Ellie. If you had asked me 5 years ago what family meant, I would have given you the textbook answer: a support system, a safe harbor, the people who love you unconditionally. Today, I know the truth. Family can sometimes be the anchor that drags you directly to the bottom of the ocean. It started when I was 24. Up until that point, I had played by all the rules. I went to a good university, got a respectable job as a junior data analyst at a logistics firm in Chicago, and tried desperately to earn the approval of my mother, Sylvia. Sylvia was a high-end real estate broker who measured a person's worth strictly by their zip code and their credit score. My older brother, Derek, was her golden child. Derek was a smooth talker, a guy who bounced from one revolutionary startup idea to the next, entirely funded by the bank of Mom. My life derailed in the span of 3 months. It started with joint pain, then chronic fatigue that was so severe I couldn't get out of bed, and finally, a string of terrifying hospitalizations. After endless tests, I was diagnosed with a severe, aggressive autoimmune disease. I was missing weeks of work. My medical bills, even with crappy insurance, skyrocketed. In November, HR called me into a sterile little room and handed me my termination papers. They called it restructuring, but we both knew the truth. I was a liability. By December, my savings were entirely wiped out. I had sold my furniture, my decent clothes, and was living off plain pasta and tap water. When my landlord handed me a 30-day eviction notice, I swallowed the last shred of my pride and called my mother. I took the train to the suburbs and sat in Sylvia's immaculate white marble kitchen. Derek was there too, lounging at the island with his wife, Natalie, drinking espresso from a machine that cost more than my entire college tuition. "Mum," I choked out, my hands trembling around a glass of water. "I'm being evicted. I just need a loan to cover a couple of months of rent and my medication, just until my new treatment kicks in and I can find remote work. I'll pay you back with interest." Sylvia didn't even look up from her iPad. She meticulously adjusted her reading glasses. "Ellie, we've talked about this. Your generation has such a victim mentality. This illness of yours, Dr. Aris said it's highly exacerbated by stress. If you just had a more positive mindset and stopped indulging in this pity party, you'd be fine. I have lesions on my kidneys, Mum," I whispered, the tears finally spilling over. "It's not a mindset." Derek scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Oh, here we go. The drama queen returns. Look, Chloe, you've always been lazy. You chose a boring corporate job instead of hustling. I just secured a warehouse for my new luxury sneaker consignment business. Mum lent me 50 grand for the down payment. If you really wanted to succeed, you'd find a way instead of begging." Natalie smirked into her coffee cup. "Maybe you could drive Uber." "Oh wait, your car is basically a scrap metal hazard." I stared at them, the room spinning. Sylvia sighed, a sharp, irritated sound. "I am not an ATM, Ellie. It's time for some tough love. If I bail you out, you'll never learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. You're not moving back into this house. It's time to grow up." She then pulled a $20 bill from her designer purse and slid it across the marble island. "Get yourself a hot meal on the way back to the city. We have a dinner reservation in an hour." I left the $20 on the counter. I walked out into the freezing snow, got into my beat-up 2009 Honda Civic, and sobbed until I threw up. That night, my landlord changed the locks on my apartment. For the next 3 weeks, that Honda Civic was my home. I parked in brightly lit Walmart parking lots, layering every piece of clothing I owned to stave off the biting Chicago winter. I rationed a jar of peanut butter and a loaf of bread. My joints screamed in agony. I felt like I was dying, and the people who were supposed to love me were busy buying luxury sneakers. The turning point wasn't some magical, cinematic revelation. It was pure, unadulterated rage. One night, parked under a flickering street lamp, shivering violently under a thin blanket, I pulled out my cheap, cracked laptop. I couldn't do physical labor. I couldn't commute. But I still had my brain, and I understood data. During my months of illness, I had scoured the internet for resources, dietary plans, and symptom trackers for chronic autoimmune sufferers, finding nothing but fragmented, confusing, and expensive advice. I realized there was a massive gap in the market for a comprehensive AI-driven platform that connected chronic illness patients with specialized remote dietitians, symptom analytics, and affordable supplement sourcing. I used the free Wi-Fi from a nearby McDonald's. I taught myself advanced coding frameworks. I slept 3 hours a night. I pitched my raw, buggy prototype to 100 angel investor groups online. 99 ignored me. But the 100th, a woman named Beatrice Thorne, a former healthcare executive who had lost her sister to lupus, didn't. We met on a Zoom call while I was sitting in the front seat of my freezing car, wearing a beanie to hide my unwashed hair. I laid out the data, the market potential, and my absolute refusal to fail. 2 days later, Beatrice wired $50,000 in seed money into my account. I didn't celebrate. I rented a tiny, moldy basement apartment for $600 a month. I bought a heater, a desk, and a coffee maker. And I disappeared. For 3 years, I didn't send a text, an email, or a carrier pigeon to my family. As far as they were concerned, I had fallen off the face of the earth. And as far as I was concerned, I was an orphan. The business was called Vitality Sync. The first year was brutal. I worked 18-hour days, fueled by instant coffee and sheer spite. Beatrice mentored me, guiding me through the treacherous waters of healthcare tech. By year 2, our user base exploded from 2,000 to 500,000. By year 3, we had secured partnerships with 3 major national health insurance providers. The money didn't just trickle in, it flooded. We closed a Series B funding round at a valuation of $80 million. I moved out of the moldy basement and into a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. I hired a team of 50 people. I finally afforded the top-tier medical care I desperately needed, putting my disease into a manageable remission. I was 28 years old, independently wealthy, and practically bulletproof. I kept a low profile personally, but in the tech world, Vitality Sync was making waves. I knew it was only a matter of time before the collision happened. The bomb detonated on a Tuesday in October, exactly 3.5 years after my mother handed me a $20 bill and told me to get a hot meal. Forbes ran a feature on their website, "The Underdog Innovators Revolutionizing Health Tech." Right there, under the bold headline, was a high-resolution photo of me, wearing a sharp-tailored suit, standing in my glass-walled office. The article detailed my journey, my company's massive valuation, and explicitly stated my estimated personal net worth. I hadn't changed my phone number. I just had all unrecognized calls routed to silence. At 8 a.m., the day the article dropped, my phone began vibrating off my desk. 5 missed calls. 10, 20. Then came the text message. "Ellie darling, I just saw the incredible article. I am sitting here in tears. I always knew you were destined for greatness. Derek and I are so proud of you. We've missed you so much. Please, let's do dinner tonight." "My treat. Mom keks." I stared at the screen, a cold, dark amusement washing over me. Darling, I always knew. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it was breathtaking. I didn't reply. 2 days later, my executive assistant, Sarah, buzzed my intercom. "Miss Bennett, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's a woman and a man in the lobby. They're causing quite a scene. They say they're your mother and brother, and that you're expecting at them." A slow smile crept onto my face. The trap had presented itself faster than I anticipated. "Send them up, Sarah, and make sure security is on standby on this floor. Just in case." The elevator doors opened, and Sylvia and Derek stepped out. Sylvia was dressed to the nines in a Chanel suit, her eyes darting around the massive, sleek corporate floor, taking in the expensive art and the bustling employees. Derek trailed behind her, looking noticeably worse for wear. His hairline had receded, and the expensive swagger he used to carry was replaced by a twitchy, nervous energy. "Ellie!" Sylvia gasped, rushing forward with her arms outstretched. I didn't stand up from my mahogany desk. I simply raised a hand, stopping her dead in her tracks. "Sylvia." "Derek. To what do I owe the pleasure of this unannounced intrusion?" Sylvia's arms dropped awkwardly. She forced a laugh, recovering her composure. "Sylvia. What happened to Mom? Oh, Ellie, look at this place. It's stunning. I told the receptionist, that's my daughter's empire. We have been so worried about you." "Worried?" I repeated, leaning back in my leather chair. "That's a fascinating word. The last time we spoke, you told me I was a lazy victim and handed me a 20. Did you think $20 was going to sustain me for 3 years? Derek stepped forward, rubbing the back of his neck. "Come on, Chloe. Don't be like that. We were just practicing tough love. You know how Mom is. And hey, look, it worked. You wouldn't be sitting in this fancy chair if we hadn't pushed you." The delusion was almost physically repulsive. I looked at Derek. "Tough love. Right. How is the luxury sneaker business, Derek? The one Mom gave you 50 grand for?" Derek flushed a deep, ugly crimson. He looked at Sylvia, who suddenly found the stitching on her designer handbag fascinating. "Well," Derek stammered, "the market fluctuated. Supply chain issues. You know how it is in business." "I do," I said smoothly. "Which is why I know that supply chain issues is usually a cover for blowing through capital on personal expenses and filing for bankruptcy, which you did 8 months ago, according to public records." Sylvia cleared her throat loudly. "Ellie, family doesn't keep score. We are here to celebrate you. And well, we are family. We support each other." She walked to the edge of my desk, leaning in intimately. "Derek is ready for his next venture. A tech platform, actually. Very similar to yours. He just needs a tiny bit of seed capital to get it off the ground. And considering how well you're doing, we thought it would be a beautiful family partnership." "A partnership," I echoed, resting my chin on my steepled fingers. "Exactly," Derek said, his eyes lighting up with greedy desperation. "I need an investment of just 500,000. Pocket change for you, right? I'd even be willing to come on board here at Vitality Sync as VP of Operations while I build my platform. We'd dominate the market, sis." They were completely serious. They had left me to die in a freezing car, and now they had walked into my fortress, expecting me to hand over $500,000 and an executive title to the brother who told me to get a job at a fast food joint. I looked at them for a long, silent minute. I saw the greed sweating out of their pores. I saw the entitlement. And in that moment, I knew exactly how I was going to ruin them. I wasn't just going to kick them out. That was too easy. I was going to let them dig their own graves, and I was going to hand them the shovels. 500,000, I murmured, pretending to consider it. I let the silence stretch until Derek looked like he was going to hyperventilate. Then I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Derek," I said softly, "I think we can arrange something, but we're going to do this my way." "Your way?" Derek blinked, his arrogant smile faltering for a fraction of a second before roaring back to life. "Sure, Chloe. I'm flexible. I know you've got a specific corporate culture here. I can adapt." Sylvia beamed, clasping her manicured hands together. "Oh, this is wonderful. A family enterprise. Just like the Kennedys or the Roy family. We always knew you two would be a powerhouse team." I didn't bother pointing out how those specific family dynasties usually ended. Instead, I pressed a button on my desk phone. "Sarah, could you please ask Anderson to join us in my office and tell him to bring the standard venture capital term sheets?" Anderson Grant was my lead corporate counsel. He was a man who looked like he ironed his socks and had zero sense of humor. Exactly the kind of shark you want swimming in your moat. When he entered, carrying a leather folio, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Sylvia, Derek, this is Anderson," I said smoothly. "If we are going into business together, we are going to do it by the book. No handshakes, no verbal agreements. I will establish a separate holding company to issue the $500,000 seed fund for your platform, Derek. But it comes with stipulations." Derek waved a hand dismissively. Yeah. Standard VC stuff. Equity. Board seats. I get it." "Not exactly," Anderson said, his voice flat and perfectly modulated. He began distributing thick packets of paper. "Ms. Bennett is not taking equity because, frankly, your business plan, which we pulled from your recent unfunded pitch deck, is highly speculative. This will be a secured loan. 6 months. You must hit 3 specific development milestones by the end of that period. A functional beta, a registered user base of 10,000, and a secured server infrastructure." Derek's confidence wavered. 6 months? That's aggressive for a solo founder. "You asked for $500,000, I reminded him gently. "That buys a lot of developer hours. But here is the most critical part, Derek. Because of your recent, highly publicized bankruptcy with the sneaker business, you are a massive credit risk. I cannot legally justify lending you capital without collateral." Sylvia laughed, a high, nervous sound. "Collateral? Ellie, be reasonable. Derek is just getting back on his feet. He doesn't have $500,000 in assets." "I know he doesn't," I said, locking eyes with my mother. "But you do, Sylvia. Your house." The silence in the office was deafening. The ticking of the antique clock on my wall suddenly sounded like a sledgehammer. "My house?" Sylvia gasped, her hand flying to her pearl necklace. "The Oak Brook estate. Are you out of your mind? That house is entirely paid off. It's my retirement." "It's also worth exactly $1.2 million, I stated, having already had my team run the property records the moment Sarah told me they were in the lobby. "If you believe in Derek's genius as much as you claim to, co-signing a lien on the property should be a mere formality. If he hits his milestones and secures Series A funding in 6 months, the loan is repaid, the lien is dissolved, and you all ride off into the sunset. If he defaults—" I let the sentence hang in the air, cold and sharp. Derek turned to Sylvia, his eyes wide, pleading, and entirely manipulative. "Mum, come on. It's a sure thing. The market is begging for this platform. I'll have the beta done in 3 months. Tops. It's just a piece of paper to satisfy her lawyers. I watched them. I watched the greed battle with the fear in Sylvia's eyes. I knew her weakness. Her weakness was her image, her absolute refusal to admit that her golden boy was a catastrophic failure. Backing down now meant admitting to me, the daughter she discarded, that Derek was a bad investment. I am not an ATM, Sylvia. I echoed her words from 3 years ago, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. It's time for some tough love. If you want this, you put your money where your mouth is. Otherwise, there's the elevator. Sylvia's jaw tightened. She glared at me, stripping away the faux maternal warmth. Fine. Where do I sign? They signed the papers right there on my mahogany desk. Anderson notarized them. I wired the $500,000 to Derek's newly formed LLE by 4 p.m. that afternoon. For the next 6 months, I didn't reach out to them once. I didn't need to. I had Arthur Penhaligon, a forensic accountant whose discretion I paid handsomely for, monitoring every digital footprint, public filing, and social media post Derek made. It was almost embarrassing how predictable my brother was. Within week 1, Derek leased a massive, glass-walled office space in the trendy West Loop district, prepaying a year's rent. By week 3, his wife, Natalie, was posting Instagram stories from a first-class flight to Tulum, tagging a luxury resort. By month 2, Derek had purchased a matte black Mercedes G-Wagon under the company name, classifying it as a promotional vehicle. Arthur's bi-weekly reports were a comedy of errors. Derek had hired a cheap, offshore coding farm to build his platform, but he wasn't providing them with any coherent architecture or direction. He was spending 80% of his time networking at high-end steakhouses and golf courses, expensing thousands of dollars in Wagyu beef and single-malt scotch to the company. He thought he had scammed the system. He thought the quiet, sick little sister he abandoned was too busy with her own company to check his receipts. He forgot that data is my native language. I saw every missing dollar, every fraudulent expense report, and every breached contract clause. I let him spend the rope. I let him weave it, tie the knot, and place it securely around his own neck. The 6-month deadline landed on a rainy Thursday in April. I had Sarah schedule the review meeting for 10 a.m. Derek swaggered out of the elevator at 10:05, wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than my first car, flanked by Sylvia. Sylvia looked exhausted. The stress of the lean was clearly eating at her, despite her thick layer of foundation. "Ellie," Derek announced, spreading his arms as if expecting an embrace. 6 months. Can you believe it? The time just flew by. "Have a seat," I said, gesturing to the chairs opposite my desk. Anderson Grant was already seated in the corner, his briefcase resting on his lap. Arthur Penhaligon sat next to him, a thick, bound folder resting on his knees. Derek frowned, noticing the extra audience. "Who are the suits? I thought this was a family update." "This is a compliance review," I corrected. "Anderson, you know. This is Arthur, our auditor. Let's see the beta, Derek, and the user metrics." Derek cleared his throat, suddenly looking hot in his expensive collar. He pulled a sleek laptop from his leather messenger bag and opened it. "Right. So, we've had a few pivot points. The offshore team I hired had some serious language barrier issues, and the code they delivered was a bit buggy. But we have a gorgeous wireframe, and the branding is absolutely killer. I've been doing a lot of guerrilla marketing." "Stop," I commanded gently. Derek snapped his mouth shut. "You don't have a functional beta," I said. "You have no server infrastructure, and your registered user base is 0. You have failed all 3 milestones." Sylvia gripped the armrests of her chair. "Ellie, darling, be reasonable. Tech startups take time. Rome wasn't built in a day. He just needs an extension. Another 100,000 to hire a local team. He doesn't need an extension, Sylvia, I interrupted, leaning forward. He needs a miracle. Arthur, please pass out the audit. Arthur silently stood and handed thick, aggressively tabbed folders to Derek and Sylvia. What is this? Derek demanded, his voice cracking slightly. That, I said, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register, is a forensic accounting of the $500,000 I lent your company. A company that, according to the contract you signed, was restricted to using those funds solely for software development, payroll, and server architecture. I opened my own copy. Page 4. A $75,000 lease for an office you visit twice a week. Page 12. $80,000 for a Mercedes G-Wagon. Page 22. $45,000 categorized as marketing research, which Arthur traced directly to a travel agency for a 2-week luxury vacation in Tulum for you and Natalie. Derek was hyperventilating, his eyes darting frantically across the pages. You hacked my accounts? That's illegal. You can't. I didn't hack anything, I smiled coldly. When you signed the loan agreement, you gave my holding company full audit rights to your corporate accounts. It was in the fine print. Section 4, paragraph B. You would have known that if you had hired a lawyer instead of assuming I was stupid. Sylvia's face had drained of all color. She looked like a ghost wrapped in Chanel. Derek, tell me this is a mistake. Tell me you didn't spend the house money on a car. Derek couldn't look at her. He buried his face in his hands. It gets worse, Anderson spoke up, his voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. Because Mr. Bennett used secured corporate funds for personal enrichment, it constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty and potentially wire fraud. The loan is now in immediate, catastrophic default. Default, Sylvia whispered. She looked up at me, tears welling in her eyes. Real tears this time. Ellie, please, you can't do this. I'll lose my home. I've lived in that house for 25 years. I know, I said. It's the house where you told me my autoimmune disease was a pity party. It's the house where you handed me a $20 bill while I was actively dying and sent me out into a blizzard. I was trying to make you strong, Sylvia sobbed, reaching a hand across the desk. I pulled back, refusing the touch. We are family. You have $80 million. You can forgive this. Please, Ellie. Don't make me homeless. I sat back in my chair, looking at the two of them. They were broken, terrified, and finally experiencing a fraction of the utter despair I had felt sitting in that freezing Honda Civic. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt an overwhelming sense of closure. The ghost of that terrified 24-year-old girl in the Walmart parking lot could finally rest. I am not an ATM, Sylvia, I said softly, delivering the final, fatal blow. And I believe your exact words were, if I bail you out, you'll never learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. It's time to grow up. I turned to my lawyer. Anderson, execute the lien. Foreclose on the Oakbrook property immediately and freeze Derek's corporate accounts. Wait, Derek screamed, standing up so fast his chair crashed to the floor. What are you going to do with the house? You live in a penthouse. You don't even want to live in the suburbs. You're right, I agreed, standing up to meet his gaze. I don't. Once the eviction is complete, I am transferring the deed to a non-profit foundation I set up last week. We're gutting the marble and the luxury fittings. It's being converted into a 20-bed transitional medical housing facility for low-income women suffering from chronic illnesses. Women who need a safe, warm place to recover. Sylvia let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. "My security team will escort you to the lobby," I said, hitting the button on my intercom. "Do not contact me again. Do not email me. If you come within 500 feet of this building, I will have you arrested for trespassing. Goodbye, Sylvia." "Goodbye, Derek," as the burly security guards escorted my weeping mother and completely silent brother out of my office. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows. I looked out over the sprawling, grey expanse of Chicago, the city that had nearly broken me, and the city I had eventually conquered. They had changed the locks on me when I had nothing, so I built my own house, and then I took theirs. Blood might be thicker than water, but karma is made of concrete. That's the reality of my story. Sometimes the hardest part of reaching the top isn't the grind, it's cutting the toxic ties holding you back. If you've ever had to walk away from family to save your own life, drop a comment below. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that their greatest comeback is still ahead. Keep building your empire.